Good evening. I guess I'm supposed to say my name. I'm Eli Rosenbaum, flew in from Washington today to be with you all. I'm thrilled to be here. I am an official at the U.S. Department of Justice. I'm director, I have this terrible long title, Director of Human Rights Enforcement Strategy and Policy in the Human Rights and Special Prosecution section of the Justice Department's Criminal Division. I actually got applause once before for being able to do it, so thank you. I knew much of what Jerry was talking about. I didn't know it all. So, Ken, I did not know about your key role in getting the Ethics in Government Act passed. I have to confess, many times I've sat around and said to colleagues, geez, whose idea was this? Thanks a lot. It is truly a joy and a privilege and a thrill to be with you all this evening as we honor a great American, truly a living legend, Ken Hechler. My only reservation about this lovely tribute dinner is I think it's possibly a bit premature. After all, Ken is still working at a breakneck pace, fighting for noble causes, writing books. He's published only 3 this year, but the year is not over yet. And of course, he's inspiring audiences all over the state with his stirring addresses, inspiring the nation, really. You can imagine my surprise in January when I trudged down the driveway in our home in Northern Virginia, the state next door, to pick up the Washington Post, and there at the top, right under the masthead, is this color picture of Ken Hechler, young fellow. Anyway, today alone, just this day, he has put in 9 hours at the West Virginia Book Festival, where he greeted a string of well-wishers and book purchasers. I was there for about an hour and a half, and I can't tell you how many people just came by, even if they weren't there to buy a book, and just would say, now I can say I shook the hand of a legend. It was really wonderful and inspiring. But because he's so busy, I think this dinner might be more appropriate when were he at least beginning to approach retirement age. I'm told I only have about 10 minutes to speak, and that's kind of scary because I think one would need an hour just to talk about what Ken Hechler has done and accomplished in, say, the past week, but I'll do the best I can. I'm especially pleased and grateful that I, as a U.S. Department of Justice official, have been permitted to speak here tonight, because Ken's entire adult life obviously has been devoted, above all else, to fighting for justice. As a frontline combat historian in Europe during World War II, Lieutenant Ken Hechler risked his life every day as part of the greatest generation's historic quest to bring an end to Nazi injustice and inhumanity. At war's end, Major Ken Hechler was one of the first to interrogate Hermann Goering and other top captured Nazi political and military leaders in advance of the Allied trials at Nuremberg that brought many of them to justice, at least from a law enforcement perspective. As an aide to President Harry S. Truman, Dr. Kenneth Hechler was part of the team responsible for continuing Franklin Roosevelt's great social justice legacy. Then, as a 9-term member of Congress from West Virginia, Congressman Ken Hechler fought tenaciously, including as a key figure in President Johnson's Great Society initiatives, to achieve greater social justice for the downtrodden, the victimized, and the vulnerable, from African Americans to veterans to coal miners and more. He was, as you know, as Jerry said, the only member of Congress to march with Dr. King from Selma to Montgomery. In the aptly named film that so many of us have seen, Ken Hechler in Pursuit of Justice, former Senator Bob Dole speaks in obvious amazement of Representative Hechler's tirelessness in pursuit of justice. Says Bob Dole, quote, "Ken Hechler reminded me of a windmill. He was everywhere. He was in the front row, the back row, always buttonholing somebody and talking about something for West Virginia or his constituents. I've been in politics all my life," says Senator Dole, and I've never seen anything like it, close quote. That praise is all the more impressive when one considers the fact that it comes from a senior Republican leader. And I think we need a lot more of that kind of across the aisle Ken reached out, and that's why David Tyson, who was chair of the Republican Party in this state, is here, and it's great to see you, sir.
All right, stand up, David.
Please.
Stand up.
I first had the honor of meeting him, and I don't know whether to call him Dr. Hechler, Congressman Hechler, Secretary of State Hechler, Lieutenant Hechler, Major Hechler, but I first had the great honor of meeting him about a year and a half ago when both of us were speaking in upstate New York under the sponsorship of the Robert H. Jackson Center, a marvelous organization named after the late Supreme Court Justice. Robert Jackson, most famously, of course, was also the key prosecution figure at the great post-war trial of the major Nazi war criminals held at Nuremberg, Germany in 1945-46. Ken was there to speak about his experiences questioning Hermann Goering, Alfred Jodl, Wilhelm Keitel, and others who were subsequently prosecuted by Robert Jackson and his colleagues. I was there to talk about the work that we have been doing at the U.S. Department of Justice over the past 30 years to prosecute Nazi war criminals, however belatedly, and other human rights violators who have fled to this country. Being able to hear from Ken Hechler about his experiences with Goering et al. Had me mesmerized. After all, not only was he one of the first to question these arch criminals, he was also the acknowledged master of the craft. Professor Richard Overy, in his best-selling 2001 book, Interrogations, The Nazi Elite in Allied Hands, 1945, described the techniques that made Major Kenneth Hechler so effective. It was a highly intelligent, and I want to say also a highly ethical approach that eschewed the so-called third degree. Ken Hechler didn't need that. He got his information out of these people through his smarts. Professor Overy writes that the most effective questioner at the subsequent Nuremberg trial was Justice Jackson's second in command, lawyer, later Senator Thomas Dodd, father of Christopher Dodd, more recently a senator. And according to Professor Overy, among all questioners of high-value Nazi prisoners in post-war Germany, Dodd was second best, after, you guessed it, Ken Hechler. I like to think that I'm a pretty good and reasonably accomplished questioner of suspects myself, but I learned a lot from Ken Hechler that week that we spent together in Chicago, New York. Of course, there is a much more important lesson that all of us have learned and can learn again from Doctor, Professor, Lieutenant, Major, Congressman, Secretary of State Ken Hechler, and that is how a well-lived life should actually be lived. In my faith, there is a concept called in Hebrew tikkun olam, and literally it means perfecting the world, and it is the noblest of all undertakings. Well, selflessly and seeking no reward other than the satisfaction of helping others, Ken Hechler has devoted every fiber of his being to tikkun olam, to helping others, to preserving the natural wonders of this fragile planet, and to fighting for justice. I think what he saw in Germany, where injustice led to human suffering of unimaginable scope, helped propel him on that great path. And although the world isn't even close, alas, to perfected yet, it is a much, much better place because of the tireless efforts, the boundless compassion and humanity of Ken Hechler. He is a West Virginia legend, and he is a national treasure. God bless you.
Thank you, Eli, and